So the laws of kosher wine require that the people who have hands-on access to the wine are all Jews.
Mm-hmm.
But we have several descriptions in rabbinic sources where a Christian creates a business enterprise. Let's say in one place there was a Christian who was getting taxes, he was collecting taxes in a certain rural area in southern France in the form of grapes, as the people were paying their taxes with grapes. And he said, you know what, I'm going to produce kosher wine. There were no Jews there, but he collected these grapes, he put them in a building somewhere, and then he hired a couple of Jews to come and produce kosher wine. So only the Jews had access to the grapes, and they produced this wine, and then it was being sold. But the profits were going to the guy who had ingested it, who he was converting his grape taxes into cash. So that's one type of this complicated joint venture, right? Where the Christian it all belongs to him, but the people who are doing the work are the Jews, and they're producing kosher wine. And then we have descriptions of stores that were selling wine to Jews and Christians. Sometimes when I've spoken about this before, I get cynical responses of people who say, "Well, why would any Christian want to drink kosher wine?" But it seems like there really was a market for it, and that Christians felt that this was a quality product. So, for example, one issue that came up was, in a lot of wine stores even today, you get tastings, right? There's a guy who offers you a glass. So there's a description of, I think it's also the Ravid. He was asked, there's a wine store that's selling kosher wine, and there's a guy outside offering people tastings of wine, but he's not Jewish, and the people tasting it are not Jewish. So if that wine makes its way back into the store, then the wine being sold there will not be kosher anymore. As long as it stays outside, hopefully it'll be okay. But we also have some descriptions of wine being exported. In today's kosher industry, so many things have hechsherim, so many things have kosher certificates. But one of the reasons for that is that so much food is being transported from one place to another, right? Because of the way food is produced today, because of the way it's stored, it's easy to do that. In the Middle Ages, very few food products were being moved from one place to another. And so there were not that many kosher issues, and so we don't find that much evidence of kosher certification. Really, you only find it about two things, maybe a third. One is cheese. Let's say Sicilian cheese kosher Sicilian cheese was exported to Egypt, and we have in the Cairo Geniza kosher certificates for that cheese. We have a few discussions about preserved meats, right? Usually meat was eaten fresh, more or less. But if it was salted and preserved well enough, then it could be transported. And so that sometimes happened. And wine. So we find kosher wine being exported from southern France and being taken, for example, to Barcelona in northern Spain, to Mallorca, and even all the way to North Africa. And one of the issues that comes up when that's being done is, to keep it kosher, one of the things that has to happen is that there's a Jew watching it at all times. So what if the ship was traveling and then it docked somewhere? Because these ships wouldn't go straight across the ocean, straight across the Mediterranean Sea. They'd kind of hop from one port to the next. So, the boat docked and the Jew got off to stretch his legs and, get something to eat or whatever. So he was away from the boat and away from the wine for a little while. And so then people were saying, well, maybe the wine isn't kosher anymore because you weren't with it all the time. So that's another type of question that comes up that gives us some inkling of what was happening with kosher wine and how really it was part of an industry, right? We see kosher wine being produced, sold in stores, and also exported by ship.